said you ain't from his nation, simply cannot stay. There's been a declaration, boy, your papers ain't no good. Your quick evacuation surely suit this neighborhood. No, you ain't no permanent resident. Now your name is mud. You ain't nothing but a transient. I can see it in your blood. Your temperament is badly bent. This is not your home. Load 'em up, move 'em out. Adios, shalom.
Brad Forrester, we call him
Michael
one of the OGs.
Komorn, how are you?
Very good, Brad. Very good. I wanted to give you a little intro. I know I think of you as like the OG of OGs of the movement because you're one of the first individuals I met, and very inspiring. I think Chad still talks about you. He has a couple of dreams here and there. I don't get Chris, but I know you recently back into the Michigan Normal Board and pursuing membership, and of course, one of the greatest events of the year, the Bridge Walk, and you are of course in charge of that as well. So, welcome back to the show, Brad. And what is going on?
Well, again, thank you, Michael, and Jamie and Rick and the crew down there, Chad. It's awful nice to always come on the show. I consider this one of the most informative programs for the medical cannabis community here in Michigan that there is available, and I encourage everyone to listen. So, and your previous caller, man, geez, what a heavy conversation that was, huh?
How great was that, Brad? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was something. But, I guess getting onto this Bridgewalk thing, it's a form of advocacy, certainly, perhaps a little bit different than your previous guest might endorse or has engaged in, but it's advocacy nonetheless. And, what the Bridgewalk is designed to do, and by the way, it takes place this upcoming Monday, September 1st, and what it's designed to do is to, let the cannabis community interact on a non-cannabis type of way with the general public. And it demonstrates to them that, look, we are human beings. We are your sons. We are your daughters. We are your mothers, your fathers, your aunts, and your uncles. And we are just regular people. And so it's good in that sense, and it gives us an opportunity to engage the perhaps non-consuming people in Michigan and answer questions for them and discuss issues that they may have. And, the past couple of years that we've done it, it's worked out really, really well. This is our third year of walking the bridge under Michigan Normal's banner. And, I'll tell you what, I'm pretty proud to be a part of it. We seem to have a fair amount of walkers every year, and, we really do our jobs well, and we have had nothing but positive feedback from what we've done in terms of the bridge walk. So, in fact, I think it's expanded a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Human Solution is doing, Marching in Unity or doing their version of the bridge walk. So it's catching on. And the more members of the cannabis community that we can get to do this, hey, man, I'm all for it. And I don't care what flag you're flying or walking under. As long as you got a cannabis T-shirt on and you're engaging the public in a positive way, it can only be a good thing for our community as a whole.
Brad, we had that exact same conversation a little earlier. Terry Marintat called in, and we were able to take her call, and she mentioned Human Solution gathering somewhere up in the Onaway area, and we made mention of the same thing, too, is that, many banners, one purpose, conversation all around, and also the need for people that are not necessarily able to walk the bridge itself but still want to participate by being one of those catching people that stays at the edge of the bridge and potentially has even more people view them and their T-shirts than anyone else because they're standing right there at the end.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. And, I think that this year we're going to have a bunch of volunteers that stand there at the end near the finish line where people, after they have crossed the bridge, they got to go through like a little gate and they get a ticket that says your you've crossed the bridge and you're number 2,674 fourth person who's done it, and we'll have a bunch of people there at the end, and they'll be handing out normal literature, and it explains to them lots of things about legalization and medical cannabis and industrial hemp, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, THS is going to be handing out some literature, and maybe even ASA. So, I'm just proud of all these people who take away from their, holiday weekend to go out and do this, because it is important work. These are important people for us to try to persuade, and, everybody that's involved, THS, ASA, NORML, even if you're walking as an independent, God bless you, and thank you for doing it. That's Brad Forster's feeling on this.
Well, and I got to echo that sentiment too, Brad. Jamie and I both have been involved in both of the bridge walks previously, and I have to tell you, it's a proud time. It's also a majestic experience because you start awfully darn early, and to watch the sun come up over the water and over the two peninsulas is a pretty amazing experience. Certainly gives you a reconnection with nature. I will remind those of us that walked last year and those that may not know, we got sniffed down by the drug dog last year, and he made friends with us and licked us and had a good time, and we took a big picture with the state police and the drug dog right there before we walked over the bridge. We've made friends in all different kinds of uniforms and with all different types of purpose there, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad that you did bring that up, Rick. Anybody who is listening who plans on coming and walking, leave your cannabis in your car. If you got a vape pen, that's perhaps one thing. But, this is a time, not to smoke cannabis in public. This isn't some sort of a protest. This is a march where we're educating people. And, the drug-sniffing dogs are going to be there. There's a mountain of National Guardsmen and an army of state police people. And so, again, we want to present to them the best of the cannabis community with this opportunity. And, one way to do it is to leave your cannabis in your car.
Yep, I'm glad you mentioned that. The important thing for us to do is to make a positive impact on all those people that walk around us. And remember, there are thousands and thousands of people that walk. It's important for us to start off as a group, if we can, to make a big impact as we walk through. I remember last year as we walked past the bandstand, the announcer there who was announcing the different groups that came by said, "Hey, look, it's the people from NORML, yay!" And then we got quite a round of applause moving through. It's quite a good thing to be recognized. And even though different people have different speeds and different rhythms, so they split up as we move across the bridge. There's a gathering point where everyone gets together. It makes it a lot easier for us to do those things as a group, and to make sure that those of us that are being pushed on wheelchairs or that might have a slower time have the assistance that they need to get across. Is there a gathering place planned this year that we're talking about for the NORML and the THS people?
Yeah, there is, Rick, and traditionally, to start the journey across the bridge, we tell everybody just to get on a bus. I think this year the Cannabus will actually be there, and perhaps taking people across who, may have a tough time affording the $5, because it does cost $5 to cross the bridge in the bus. But we all gather on the north side of the bridge prior to the walk, right in front of the Bridge Authority building, underneath the gigantic flagpole. It's virtually impossible to miss. And this year, like years past, we are asking all walkers to please be at the flagpole by 7 a.m. because we would like to start walking at 7:15, and we got to make sure that we hand out shirts. Michigan NORML is giving away a free Bridge Walk T-shirt to everybody who shows up, and so you want to get to the buses by 6:30 at the very latest, because last year the bus that I was on got behind a bus that broke down, and it took us almost 40 minutes to cross that bridge. So you don't want to cut it too close. If you can get in line to get on a bus at 6 or 6:15, you should be in pretty good shape. If you get there by 6:30 to get on the bus, you're going to be cutting it a little close. And like I said, at 7:15, we've handed out all the shirts that we're going to hand out, and we start our march across. Then, when we get to the other side, people are invited to come and join Michigan NORML. We've bought some donuts and some hot coffee and some juice and water, and certainly it's not a full breakfast, but it's a little snack to tide you over and get some sugar back in your bloodstream and wake you up a little bit from the walk. And that's going to happen just 3 blocks south from where you exit the bridge.
Okay.
If you get off the bridge and you turn to the right and walk 3 blocks, you'll come to a Burger King restaurant. Turn left at the Burger King, go into their parking lot, and right behind the Burger King, there's a beautiful pavilion. It's called the Mackinac Trailhead Pavilion, Mackinac City Trailhead Pavilion. It's where all the snowmobilers start their trips in the winter. Go ahead.
So, Brett, I hate to interrupt you. The Mackinac Trailhead Pavilion is where we'll be gathering. Thanks for that info. But we have Sheriff Federspiel holding too. Brad, please hold on the line, too, so we can wrap it up with you after we finish with the sheriff, if you don't mind. That'd be great.
Certainly. Give him a poke for me.
Thanks.
Is it true, Sheriff?
Good evening.
Thank you so much for calling in. I understand you're involved with an investigation. Maybe it was a homicide investigation or something.
Yeah, I apologize for not making it earlier, but I'm glad you took me later. Thank you.
Duty call. So you've been on the show in the past, and we enjoyed talking to you, and it was such a pleasure to hear some of the kind of an evolution of what we always hoped would be the direction that other law enforcement agencies and political, law enforcement political positions would take. And this issue came up with the military equipment being available for, the sheriff's department. And explain to our listeners exactly how that all came about. Like we were sitting here, we're fascinated about how that equipment, becomes available. Is it bought? Is it given? Who contracts it for it? How is it, made available? Are there like brokers that come and, are taking bids on it? How does that play out?
No, that's all great questions. One of the things my staff is always looking for ways to save the taxpayers' dollars through equipment. And one of my staff members came across a website from the federal government for military surplus. And we've never taken any firearms. We've never taken any rifles. I really don't see the need for that. We did take some laptop computers and some things called Go Packs for the deputies. They can put in their cars, and it carries water and other supplies for them. We did last year accept a vehicle. Well, I had no idea how big this vehicle was, and we applied for it. It brought in. It wasn't a weaponized vehicle, but it was an MRAP, MRAP, which is a mine-resistant ambush protected vehicle. And it was pretty shocking to see the size of that thing roll up on the streets of Saginaw. So trying to keep an open mind, as I always do, I said we'd take a look at it. It's in Saginaw, and the military says, hey, if you need parts for it, it's free, the vehicle is free, pay for gas, you insure it. So we hung on to it. But what I found was I hate to call it a lemon, but it really was. We had 3 starters to be put into it in 4 months. We had some other parts that we were looking for we couldn't get. There was one part that we needed. They said we could come down to Columbus, Ohio and pick it up, and then we would need someone to install it, which is a technician that specializes in vehicles that large. So as I looked at my budget this year, I said, it's not worth our while. I don't want anything that big anyways. Doesn't get good gas mileage. And yes, it could be used in certain rescue attempts, but quite frankly, it was a pretty easy decision for me to say call the military and have them come get it.
Good call.
I'm going to make a literary joke. It sounds like a catch-22. Does anyone get that? Is it fun? No? Okay.
Yeah, really. It was. It's an easy call. Of course, I made that decision the end of July. August 9th, Ferguson, Missouri. Everything's going on down there. People called me on it and said, what are you doing with that MRAP? I said, well, I decommissioned it a few weeks ago. Nothing to do with Ferguson, but boy, in light of Ferguson, we had a few. Oh, thank you. I know it is. In my heart of hearts, it's the right call. I'll never get another one. The military said, well, you can get another one. I said, I don't want another one. Just come get it. Come take it, or we'll drive it down to you. But we've had protests. We've had some situations that could have turned into Ferguson. We we handled them. I won't comment on Ferguson. It's not my business to Monday morning quarterback them. But I will say how we have handled things when we've had protests involving other agencies within my county that have had shootings that's been racially charged. The protests went on. We don't bring in any type of equipment. We don't bring in a mass of law enforcement. Did we have some on standby? Absolutely. Were they visible to the people protesting? No, they weren't. And the protests went on peacefully. So, again, I don't know what intelligence they had in Ferguson, so I'm not going to try and compare the two. But since that was a topic of conversation, I know what we've done in the past and what we'll continue to do, and that's to let people come out, protest, speak their minds, whatever it may be, whether it be for legalization of marijuana, whether it be for discrimination, anything that would come up. And thankfully, we don't have too much of that in Saginaw County, so we're very proud of that.
Well, I think, you kind of alluded to the point, which is that, if someone's exercising their right to gather and the right to free speech, there should be an embracing of it of all government officials, all people involved in it, and it shouldn't be responded to with the presence of like a military, like as if it's going to be, martial law or something. It's going to be, and your civil rights are going to be suspended. And I think, there's a way to interact. Sometimes when you pull out the big guns, and that's the impression of what the law enforcement community is presenting itself. There's a disconnect with the community. And I think you talked about that last time. The old school way of policing had always been, the officers knew and were friendly with the neighbors, and like they knew everyone in the community. The community was, helpful in pointing out who the bad guys were, and it was a much more, on the ground interaction with the neighborhood. And there's been that kind of disconnect. This is your returning of the vehicle is a unique, and I don't know how other sheriffs are responding to it. Maybe there's a Facebook sheriff's page. Yeah, tell me, please.
I've had other sheriff's officers call me and say, "Hey, can we have it?" I said, "I'm not giving it to you. You can call the military. If they give it to you, they can give it to you. But I'm not going to give it to anyone. That's not my place. You can call the military. If they give it to you, then it's yours. But I'm sending it back where we got it."
Well, what about that? What about this trend that there's such a demand for it? Ferguson, without discussing the facts, there was a large local police military presence with weapons and military type. Why is that? And why is that, I guess, is the question. Why?
Well, it's a large problem. It's not something that I think we could address in a minute or two, but it all comes down to leadership. I've always believed the team takes on the face of the coach. I wear my tan pants, my brown shirt, and a tie. I'm a civilian peacekeeper. That's a constitutional sheriff. And you'll find me quite frequently on a horse with my mounted division, riding through the streets of Saginaw, out in the out county. Can connect with you that way. You could do a lot on a horse as well. I don't know if other agencies have mounted divisions, but boy, you can really manage a crowd fairly well from a horse. It's not
Michigan State Police in Lansing during the protests over the horses right to work law. Certainly, they were very effective.
Yes. Yeah, and they're not intimidating. They can be. They're a big animal, and they're intimidating just to sit on one if you're not used to it. But they're a people-friendly type of vehicle, if you will. And it can be used in an urban area. It can be used, I went down with my mounted division. There were 7 of us. We had a free jazz concert down on the Saginaw River by the Temple Theater on a Friday night, and at the same time there was a concert in an outdoor amphitheater at the First Merit Event Park with Eddie Money and the Romantics. We had thousands and thousands of people, and everything went well. We had a few officers on the ground, but the majority of us were on horses. People really appreciated that. It was a family-friendly time for everybody involved, and yet if there were large crowds or if there was any disruption, we would have been able to handle that from the horses. So I'm not saying everything needs to be handled from a horse, but I'm a pretty simple guy, and I work for the people. I know what the people of Saginaw County want, and I try to give them that best I can. I'll never please 200 and some thousand people, but I do the best I can, knowing what my role is.
Sheriff, I see on the Michigan NBC site that you, in an article written, that you have an additional vehicle from the military that's used as a medical transport by the SWAT team, and that you've kept that vehicle. Obviously, you've repurposed that military hardware for a purpose that's much more advantageous to your department. Is that right?
Yes, sir. We have a regional SWAT team. It's called Emergency Services Team, and they go out on high-impact raids where there may be weapons. That's something that pretty much every major county has. And so what we decided to do was, as an agency, have a team of physicians. These are doctors that work for me, EMTs, and that vehicle is marked up with the medical symbols. I want everyone to know, if you see that Humvee, it's going to have not Saginaw County Sheriff emblazoned all over it. It may have that logo of Saginaw County Sheriff, but it's going to have the medical emblem on it. I want people to know it's a vehicle, like a MASH vehicle. These physicians go in, they follow the team. If someone were to get injured, whether it be one of the SWAT team members or citizen, we have physicians that have their equipment in a larger vehicle. We used to have an old ambulance, but the engine went out on it. It was one of those Ford F-350s with the big box on the back ambulance, and it was pretty old. So when we got that vehicle from the military, we did repurpose it, and it's only used for my physicians and EMTs. And people are good with that. We used it a couple of times during some snow events last year when we couldn't get our two-wheel drive Tahoes. We only have 2 four-wheel drive vehicles, and we needed to get out to the public, so we did bring it out to go on a few calls and get some people in. If doctors or nurses needed to get to work and they couldn't make it, we picked them up and brought them in. So there's a place for everything, and again, it comes, I believe, from leadership. That was my decision to do that. I won't let it be driven for anything else or used for anything else. Some agencies want to look militaristic and act militaristic. I'm not the military. I don't want to be the military. I'm a civilian peacekeeper.
Why is that?
Again, a sheriff.
Why
is it?
Why is that? What's your explanation for? I know you can't speak for them, but what would be your thought on why they do that, and why would like, for example, one of the sheriff's departments that we know need a grenade launcher?
Yeah, boy, that's a question for that agency. I know. I really don't know the answer to that, other than that is how you want to be portrayed in your community as a law enforcement, whether you want to be tough, militarized. Maybe the people of those communities want that from their law enforcement, but I know here in Saginaw they do not want that. So, again, I think it goes back to serving the people. If law enforcement agencies, especially sheriffs understand this, I think, better than most, because we're elected directly by the people. And so we're usually in tune. I try to be anyways. Can't speak for all 83 sheriffs in the state of Michigan, but here in Saginaw County, it's just being in tune with your constituents. As you get into law enforcement agencies, a lot of times there's a lot of bureaucracy between the people and the police, and it's not intentional. It is the way it is. There's a city council that is elected, 7 to 9 people. They hire one person who's a manager, who then hires a police chief, who then hires all of the police officers. And so, I've found that being a sheriff, I don't answer to a manager. I don't answer to the commissioners. They give me my budget, and I work within that budget, but I answer to the people. And so I find myself being out in the public quite frequently, talking to people, asking what they like, what they want to see from us. What is it that you want from us? And if you do that, and you do it with a clean conscience and an open heart, and an open mind. You have to have an open mind and some thick skin sometimes, but you'll usually get the answer. And if the public bears that, they want that, they'll get that. I probably wouldn't be the sheriff if they wanted to see us all looking military, because I really, in my heart of hearts, don't think that's the way to go.
What an interesting perspective, and thank you very much for sharing that. Sheriff, you've been very forthcoming, and I know that your time is precious. Do you have a few more minutes with us, or do you need to run?
Sure. No, I've got time for you. I've cleaned up my work.
Fantastic. For our callers and for our listeners now, we're approaching the 10 o'clock hour, which means our online presence is going to terminate, but we'll still be able to broadcast, and, of course, you'll be able to listen to the full show on the podcast afterwards at blogtalkradio.com/plan.
Those people that are listening, as long as you continue to listen, as we go past the hour, you will remain on the line. You can hear the continuation of the interview right now with Sheriff Federspiel. So Rick, continue if you like.
You know, and I'm looking here at the listing of where the MRAP vehicle like you had, have been delivered, and there are quite a few different counties here in the state of Michigan that have received them, including Livingston, Oakland, Washtenaw counties. Some of those perhaps don't have necessarily large urban centers. So certainly it seems like a proliferation of those MRAP vehicles coming through. Have you had anybody, any other sheriffs, show any interest in perhaps having the same return motive that you've had?
No, I haven't. You know, I usually try to meet with as many sheriffs as I can in my region on a regular basis, but yearly we have conferences. We try to get together in a host sheriff's county, and this fall we'll be meeting in Battle Creek to have a fall conference for a couple of days. So it'll be interesting to get the take on what the other sheriffs are thinking. I'm sure, you know, people talk about what's going on in Saginaw. They may mention me occasionally. I know that there are some things that can sometimes be controversial. And sometimes they call me and say, hey, that was a great idea. How did you do that, or what did you do? And that's nice to hear when it's something that I think is a good idea, when I have sheriffs who maybe have served many more terms than me call me and ask me that. So I'll find out in the fall. I really don't know if there's any. No one's called me to tell me that they're going to follow my lead, but you know, every county's different. Everybody has different takes on how to run a sheriff's office, and again, you'll find 83 sheriffs gathered in a room and 83 unique personalities, that's for sure.
Well, certainly we hope that between all the different models that we have, 83 different counties in the state, that those models of protecting citizens that prove to be good rise to the top, and that knowledge is shared, and those practices get transferred over.
Sheriff,
Yep.
Sheriff, quick question.
Sure.
Do you think that this militarization can be traced back to the amendment of the Posse Comitatus Act to make an exception for the use of military in the drug war?
Yeah, maybe. That's a good point that you bring up. I don't know if there's that much thought process put into it. Quite frankly, I know when my staff told me about the military surplus, that was brought on from different websites, different blog sites. I think Police One. There's some other areas that my commanders will look and see what other agencies are doing. I think it was just a matter of someone got something and another agency said, hey, where'd you get that? And then the next thing you know, hey, here's where we got it. And I think it's quite as simple as that, to be honest with you. Just around here in Saginaw, I know there was someone who worked for a local township police agency that had told one of my commanders about getting Humvee when we were asking about trying to find a vehicle for the medical unit. And so, again, it was, hey, so-and-so has a Humvee, they got it for free. And so I think it's coming down more from just word of mouth and county to county, agency to agency. Someone sees that someone else has it, they ask how they got it, and then it spreads like wildfire, and they say, well, gee, we'd like to get in on that. And of course, a lot of agencies may push that boundary to see what their constituents will accept. Or maybe they don't think of it. I don't know. Maybe they think, hey, you know, it's a good idea, and I'll try something. I'm not opposed to trying something. I tried it. I didn't like it. It wasn't worth our while. We'll give it back. But I think that some people look at it and say, well, gee, we'd like to have all these things just in case something really, really bad happens. And I understand that thought process because you just never know in the world we live in. But, again, we just have to keep a close eye on that.
Is that agency EMT?
I'm sorry, sir?
The agency or is that the sheriff's office?
This was the sheriff's office. That's under my office. I have physicians and EMTs on my staff, and they provide support for other local law enforcement agencies that participate in the emergency services team.
You know, when we see these numbers and statistics that were published, some of the numbers are kind of startling, 300 assault rifles delivered to certain counties and things. But the numbers are accumulated since 2006. So over a period of time, a slow trickle of 10 here, 15 here. Or do you find that to be the case, or is it one large disbursement that's being reported?
No, I find that it's been over the course of time. Certain agencies acquired something, and then they acquired something else, and then they acquired something bigger. Like I say, we've had the opportunity. I've had some of my staff members ask me to let them apply to receive rifles, fully automatic rifles that the military uses, and I said no. We do allow some of our deputies to carry a patrol rifle that's a semi-automatic rifle for instances that we may need them. If you have a Connecticut or a Colorado type of school shooting, you may need something like that, but I'm okay with that. We're not walking around with them. We do carry them in the cars, and some of the cars I don't personally carry one, but we do allow that. But I didn't want to get those from the military, so I'm real selective. Like I say, the laptops were, I thought, a good idea. If they weren't going to use laptops, I sure could. We write a lot more reports than we shoot bullets, so I thought that was a good investment.
That's a great attitude and a good guideline to use. We write more reports than we shoot bullets. I guess that goes into the question, too, about time spent by officers training with some of this new equipment as well. When grenade launchers are given out and MRAPs are given out, are officers taken off the street for specific training courses on these things? And is that itself sort of a burden on public safety?
Well, that's another good point. You know, that was something that I mentioned to my staff when we got that MRAP. I said, well, now tell me, who's going to drive this 18,000-pound vehicle? Who's qualified to drive that vehicle? Who is an expert at doing that? Because not just anyone can. And we actually had to find 3 individuals that had the qualifications. And then, of course, you have to, if you have a grenade launcher, for goodness sakes, I've never shot one of those. But, yeah, you've got to find it in your budget somewhere to train additionally. And we're already finding it tough to just maintain the training that we're required to do by the state of Michigan. So although you may get some of these things for free, you're right, that training is on you. It's on the taxpayer. And, you know, the fuel that we would have spent on that vehicle is on the taxpayer. And it's just, again, it's wherever the taxpayers, if people are engaged. And I have no problem with media calling me and asking me what it is that I have, where's my budget. I stay within the budget. I'm not going to ask someone, and I said it specifically about the MRAP, I will not ask my citizens for more money to fund this vehicle. I won't do it. So those sheriffs or chiefs out there that have that equipment, they either have it in their budget or they're not afraid to ask their constituents to provide it to them. So I think that the people of those communities will actually bear what their local law enforcement agencies use and spend, or they should anyways.
I remember last time we spoke about, you know, some of just your perception of like the history of law enforcement over the years. I know you recounted a time when, you know, officer policing, for example, became more of a CYA, and you know, like you described it, so something like, you know, a police officer being nice and drove someone home, and you know, just a change in time like that. I just asking kind of the same questions in regards to when this began, when, you know, this increase in at least the availability of this military equipment, you know, became for departments. I mean, can you pinpoint a certain time and place when it became, you know, more available, and what other departments began to do?
Well, I kind of look back at 9/11. I mean, September 2001, our country was attacked, and there was a increased heightened awareness of any future attacks. And so you started to see departments like Homeland Security pop up and other things. And that's where you're starting to see that blending of military and the Justice Department, and it trickles down to the local law enforcement agencies. There was a heightened awareness back then. I remember distinctly working in local law enforcement, and we were starting to receive training from the federal government. on how to look for terrorist activity and infrastructure security and things like that. So that's where I see it really coming from. Our focus wasn't really just on patrolling the streets and looking for your average disturbances and break-ins and things like that. It was now adding to that, receiving training that we'd never received before, more emphasis on federal mandates, I would say, that kind of trickle down to us. And then, of course, with the federal government opening up this military surplus and encouraging local law enforcement to utilize it, those two things really sparked where we're at today. If you look back, I think you can trace it back probably to shortly after 9/11.
You know, I agree, and from a lawyer's perspective, I remember there's an absolute trend, and even the way people at the time thought about. I remember I had like a jury trial. I remember like how people wanted to trust the government, and they needed there's a real need for it. I felt like it's the worst time to ever have a trial. Like a couple weeks after, but there was a period of time, and I think we also, there is it's hard to even think about what things were like before 9/11. But I read an article today where it was it's kind of talked about that period of time before 9/11 and how much of this had already been created. And it was an interesting, do you remember the movies from the 90s where there was the one cop with his pistol going up against the mega drug lords with all their machine guns and their, what I'm saying? Like there was always that perception of that with the cocaine trade and the heroin trade and whatnot. And there was a period of time that the article was put out, like during the Bush years in the 90s, after Reagan and the noted drugs, where there was a huge influx of that. And I think there was that. Bush's comments were bit more jails, more enforcement, more policing, and that kind of was the beginning or the instigation. This article made the argument of these specialized drug military organizations. But do you recall that period of time as historically?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Going back and watching the influence of Hollywood on everyday life and in policing. Yeah, definitely. You look back to the 80s and then into the 90s, and it just continued on and on and on. But yeah, I definitely remember that.
Sheriff, this is Brad Forster. I'd like to sneak in real quick here. To build on what Michael was talking about, there was a huge shooting incident out in North Hollywood where two armed and heavily padded gunmen, opened fire on the police out there, and they had automatic weapons. And do you think that perhaps had a large effect on the police forces wanting to amp up their weaponry and their capabilities to defend against these types of threats? And additionally, I think many of these military-grade weapons are justified by saying, we have armed drug gangs out there who have these automatic weapons. Are there incidences in Michigan or anywhere else that you may know of where armed drug gangs with automatic weapons are having shootouts with police? I mean, that seems to be a justification for purchasing or procuring some of this equipment, certainly.
Well, yes, you mentioned that incident out in California. I remember that, and yes, it did spark people to start to wonder, gosh, what would happen if it happened here? And it reminds me of the late 80s. I remember being a police officer when I was in South Florida. I started when I was 20 years old down in South Florida in 1987, and that tells you how old I am. I'm 46. Not too old, but old enough to know and have been there. I was issued a 6-shot revolver, and that's what I carried in 1987. And it was because of what happened with the FBI down in Miami when they were going after those armored truck robbers. And they made a movie about it. David Soul was in that movie. And they were several people died, and there were several people injured. And shortly thereafter, that a nationwide spread of semi-automatics came out, and everyone went to semi-automatic handguns. I remember when we went from the revolver to the semi-autos, 9mm, and then to 40 calibers, and usually it's because of an incident, whether it be Miami or whether it be California. So yes, you have a very valid point there that a lot of times there'll be one or two major incidents where it causes everyone across the country to think, well, maybe we should make that change so we're not caught flat-footed. And then the other thing you mentioned about the drug dealers, I've never personally encountered that type of a situation here in Saginaw. We do hear automatic gunfire. Yes, there are reports of that, and yes, we've pulled some guns off the street that scare me to death. I own one gun. I'm not a person that stockpiles. I never fired a gun before I became a police officer, and I won't have more than just that one gun now. But that's just my personal take. There are a lot of people who collect guns, and more power to them. Don't want to judge anyone. But, we don't see that type of situation here in Saginaw. Could it happen? Sure, it could happen. We could have a flare-up. We could have some people who really want to go out and knock off an armored car or something and have heavy munitions. But I know that there are agencies that we could call to help us if we needed the state police. I know they have certain rescue vehicles. They have other types of equipment that we could call upon if needed. And I think from a sheriff's perspective, again, that's what we need to look at. What are we up against in our community on a regular basis? And quite frankly, we, thank God, don't have those types of incidents. We do have a lot of violence in the city of Saginaw. We're working on that. We're getting that down. I'm very happy to say that we are focusing through data-driven crime prevention to really patrol more in those spots where there is heavy activity of guns, and whether it be gangs, whether it be drug-related, whether it just be criminal activity in general. Not everything is driven by drugs. A lot of it's driven by greed. So we are focusing on that and actually being proactive, trying to get those guns off the streets ahead of time. I just worked with Congressman Kildee a couple of days ago. We provided gun locks to our community so that people will lock their guns up, be responsible gun owners. And we gave out more than 500 of those gun locks to our citizens so that children don't accidentally shoot themselves, so that people don't leave their guns sitting in a drawer and have their house broken into and then have the gun out on the street. So we're trying to do everything that we can proactively as opposed to reactively, and a lot of it's education and, of course, having relationships with the people in your community in all parts of the community.
Excellent. Well, I have one follow-up question, and I'll let Michael and the crew take it back over. Do you think it would make more sense, instead of each department being able to procure these assets from the 1033 program, to maybe have them placed regionally around the state so that, if there's a problem in Saginaw, you call Bay City or somewhere locally or close that has these assets in place and they ship them to your area, as opposed to, every department across the state of Michigan or any other state for that matter having access to these weapons without some sort of specialized training and the equipment and the mechanics and all the other resources it takes to maintain this weaponry. Do you think it makes more sense to maybe regionalize these types of assets?
Well, that's definitely something to consider. I like that idea. We regionalize in a lot of other ways as it is, so that's not too far off the beat path of what we should be looking at. With that MRAP, one of the things that I liked about it was that it had a pressurized cabin, and we have Dow Chemicals World Headquarters right in our backyard, and so that would have been a vehicle that could be used to get close to a scene if there was a chemical spill, and you'd be protected. You can go in and use it as a rescue vehicle. But, yes, if you have regionalization, and, again, I use the state police. I know that they have equipment that I don't have. I'm not going to go buy a helicopter. But the state police have one, and they can get it here pretty quick, and I've used them before. So the idea of regionalization, utilizing other equipment with very highly trained personnel is smart. It's probably the smartest thing I've heard in a long time. So a great idea. I'll bring it up at at our sheriff's conference, again, we use those resources that other groups already have. We're doing it already, and this equipment. I don't want just anybody driving an 18,000-pound vehicle down the roads if they're not used to driving it. That could cause a lot of damage or cause some serious injury if you have an accident. I wouldn't want to see that accident. But, it's a good idea and something I think we should look at.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
The other regional kind of organizations that you're talking about are like the task force, though, right? Is that, in other words, does your department have its own drug task force, or does the sheriff department offer or lend out its sheriffs to participate in other I don't know what the moniker is that they wear in that area, but
they have they do have like I think Fang is in Bay City. They have Bayonet up in Saginaw, and they're all state police run drug teams usually. And
sure.
No, we don't participate in that. I haven't since I've been sheriff, and I've been approached, but I really need my resources to be used out in my community. And I've told those groups that I understand that they want to regionalize and do some things, and I don't mind if they have local stuff that we participate in. Years ago, we had a gang task force. There was some really highly organized local gangs that were wreaking havoc in Saginaw City. And so several of the chiefs got together, and the sheriff back then got together, and they regionalized a little task force, if you will, to address those issues. But that was disbanded, and I became sheriff, and it hasn't been reformed. However, the state police do have their drug teams. I do not participate in those. I think that, again, with my staff, when I first came to the sheriff's office, I pulled our detective out of the DEA task force, and I told the DEA director I really needed that detective to help me. I mean, we have homicide cases to work. We have break-ins and burglaries and thefts, and my main focus is to protect the people of Saginaw County and their assets and their property. That's really what I'm here to do. So I don't have an abundance of officers to send out to task forces. Other agencies will send a large percentage of their men and women out to those task forces. And I think it's better served right now in this time in our county not to do that.
Good call.
What is the incentive? I mean, is it hard to turn that down? Is it do you have to balance like the resources of the needs of there's some of the lure obviously that wasn't enough to entice you is that there's financial. Is it not true that some of the proceeds from the forfeitures will be distributed to the various local agencies to help support and or fund their budget for upcoming years? Or in other words,
yeah, some do. The state police, they don't. Their teams are set up to fund their units, and if you participate, I think there's some stipends in there available for overtime and equipment and things like that. But no, even though there's one called SCAT, Saginaw County Auto Theft Team, we don't participate in that either, and that group would actually pay half of a deputy's salary, and their main focus would be on. But again, I just think it's better to get back to the basics and put as many deputies out there to handle the 911 calls and to do the things that the community needs us to do. They want a quick response. We have 810 square miles to cover. When they're in an accident and they're injured, they want us there pretty quick, and they deserve that. So even taking one person out of the mix is a difficult thing for me to consider. So it doesn't mean we don't help those entities. No, we will. If they need assistance, they come through our county and they call. Of course, we'll help. But to actually participate in all of the things that I've been asked to participate in, I have a tough time with that from a budgetary standpoint and from a service standpoint.
I mean, this is unique. You're not. Most other sheriffs will opt in. Am I right about that? And if you take some harassing from your fellow brothers and sisters in the sheriff because you're your own, you've got your own, and there's all these other ways that the law enforcement communities are interacting for whatever reasons. And I would say that one's better than the other, but you're am I right about that? Am I reading that correctly?
Well, you're asking if I take some chiding sometimes for not participating?
Well, I'm just saying what you are saying is not what all the other sheriffs do. They are all more inclined to participate in either the task forcing and or some of the other things, and certainly weren't giving back their military equipment that they thought just some of those things are not you don't hear other sheriffs doing that, and wanting to make the primary focus of the police force. I don't hear this as attending to 911 calls. It's usually just the opposite of but I don't want to But am I right about that? Are you?
Yeah.
These are new progressive thoughts in the sheriff philosophy of law enforcement.
You're probably right. It is new and progressive. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't. I think it's old school. I think it's the way it was many years ago. I'm the 40th sheriff of Saginaw County. There's been a sheriff here since 1837. For the first 100 years, they all rode a horse. They didn't even have a car. So I don't know that it's necessarily progressive. Maybe it's looked at that way. And I know that there are a lot of other entities, a lot of chiefs who may frown on the way I operate, but I'm not here to win a popularity contest among my colleagues. I serve the people of Saginaw County, and I try to do it in the simplest way possible. What are the needs? And the needs really are they want us there when they need us. They may never call us. They may call us once in their life, but they want us there, and they want us there as fast as we can get there in a legitimate fashion so we're not harming others. It's my job to make sure that the deputies fulfill that vision. And so the vision that I have comes from the people I serve, and then I enforce that vision through policy. So it's really about, you have to think of it that way, in my opinion. If you don't think of it that way, then you start to see things that are, I think some people might consider to be outrageous. And so, again, it's not easy. Not everything that I've done or will do in the future may be considered the best idea, but I'm also one to know that if I do something and I feel it's not working or I shouldn't have done it, I'll reverse it out. I have no problem saying it. Everybody, does things. Some people have too much pride to say, oh, gosh, this is the wrong thing. I might look like a fool. I don't worry about that. I know how people are. We are human beings. We're expected as leaders to go out there and make a decision that's best for our constituents and for the people. And I think the people of Saginaw County, I would at least hope so. I would hope that they would recognize in me that I'm a citizen first, and I happen to be the sheriff. So I work for the people. I work for my family. I work for my friends in the community. I work for the people that I don't know. But obviously I work for everyone, and I'm from this community. I grew up here. I think I know what the majority want, so I just try to do that. And it's kind of a simple approach, I guess, but it seems to be working okay for us. We have a great staff. I'm constantly in contact with my staff. I go out. I went out to all the road patrols. I met with each of the shifts throughout the last week to give them updates on what we're doing at the sheriff's office at the top level command. I went right out to the substations, called them all in for a few minutes, and let them know, hey, if this is what I expect, this is what the people expect from me, and therefore I expect it of you. And will I have high expectations and be tough? Sure, I will, unless you're following those policies and that vision. And then, hey, I'll always be your friend.
Right. Sheriff, it's a little late, and I appreciate you staying with us this late. Thank you so much for your call in, and we really appreciate you giving us this amount of time. And we certainly understand the reason for the delay. Obviously, issues of the job take precedence over media opportunities. So, thanks again for making us a part of your evening. We appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. And I just wanted to say, the caller that was on prior to me, I was listening in for a few minutes. I had a moment, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I should get the cannabis. I've never seen that vehicle, but maybe I don't need an MRAP. Maybe I need to see that vehicle. That might be a good transport vehicle. I just thought I'd throw that.
We've driven it through Saginaw County a couple times, and I'm rather glad you haven't seen it at this point.
Rick, I'm hearing a huge photo opportunity right now.
I love it.
I'd go see it. I tell you take me on a tour. You bring it to Saginaw. You call me. You've got my number. I'd love to see it.
We certainly will.
Listen, I'm going to set this up. We're going to videotape the whole thing. We're going to send it back to John Oliver. Okay?
Yeah.
Look at what.
Do that, would you?
Stacy Theus, who runs the cannabis, would absolutely love that. She would completely agree, no question. I don't even need to ask her for sure. She's down, that's for sure. So.
We have a date. Give a date. Put it in pen.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time. Anytime. I'd love to call back.
Thanks again. Take care now.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Boy, what a great show this night has been. Wow. Amazing. The wonderful, great guests we've had.
Where's Brad? Look at Brad Rick on.
B-Rad. He's still there.
He's still on.
I knew he would be. Hey, and what do you think, Brad? I know you may not have been listening the entire night. You might have caught some or most of our medical professional on there. You said it was a heavy conversation before. But the sheriff, what a great snag on that one, too, eh?
Yeah, it was real good. And, if he made my suggestion to regionalize those military assets, I think that would be a huge victory, not only for the cannabis community, but for the citizens of the state of Michigan.
Oh, I think so, too. And what a great concept it is, and it makes total sense. He inferred it, but he didn't put the two together until you mentioned it. Now that could potentially be policy across the state.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
Well, let's debate that for 10 seconds. Why... Just like why was regional better than in terms of like every city saying just pull it back a little bit?
How about not having it?
Right, I'm just wondering why.
If that was an option, certainly that would be the
You're
preference,
saying,
right? But if you have three across the state and each one of them responds to wherever it is, that means Livingston County doesn't have one, Oakland County doesn't have one, Wayne County doesn't have one. There's one for all of them.
Yeah. And we do need the assets, Michael. As somebody from the cannabis community, I'll be the first to say it because there are bad people out there. But, certainly we shouldn't be using those military-type assets to raid or serve warrants on suspected drug dealers or consumers. But, if you've got a crew out there that's taking down armored trucks or banks, I think that those are perfectly legitimate law enforcement tools in that respect. And, if that's the case...
used for that?
Yeah, if they're regionalized, it's likely that they would be used for those types of things.
How often is that needed so far? I mean, how can you account for any specific time in the last whatever that is, even that a helicopter was needed?
Well, they use helicopters for searches up here in northern Michigan when people get lost in the woods all the time. So
they do it in Flint too.
Yeah, and the MRAP vehicle I think is a good analogy. Not every community needs it, but Rick, how many did you say are in the state of Michigan right now?
Boy, I looked at about 6 counties that seem to receive an MRAP.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those counties have absolutely no need for that vehicle. You heard the sheriff say that it was a money pit, basically. And, if we need one, if somebody in Kalamazoo needs one, how far is it from Detroit or the Ypsi area to Kalamazoo? A couple hours? Is it really going to make that kind of a difference in a situation to drive it 2 hours as opposed to having one right there in the backyard? I think that it's a subject that needs to be discussed and felt out a little bit better. I mean, we are only scratching the surface of that issue here.
Well, and there's 10 of them, by the way, 10 MRAPs. And by the way, most of them are clustered in certain areas, which means there's overlapping utility. And that other areas, for example, the entire UP, which is an area that seems like an MRAP might actually be helpful in some of those rugged situations where there are none. So,
I mean, are we not jumping the gun here? Listen, I understand the need for security, safety, and search and rescue, and that is something I would be in favor of. If it was a real search, or if they had a regional for search and rescue, or regional for hostage situations,
ski patrol.
But we're not, the task forces. They kind of already exist. I guess it may just be semantics.
Well, it's true that if every single local law enforcement agency is militarized and ready to do this stuff, it's going to happen a lot more often than if those things were regionalized and it was just used for certain things.
It's the baby steps. argument, but I still maintain
it's already regionalized.
Yeah.
Through this task force.
So demilitarize our police forces instead of unmilitarize the police forces sounds like a more reasonable approach, because I think it's probably not likely to get them to return things like the grenade launchers and the MRAPs.
Oh, that's the lesson of the day. Give it back to the feds. We don't need it.
Yep.
And what we're using it for is to do drug raids, largely on.
Yeah, and as you heard Sheriff Federspiel say, Saginaw, one of the toughest counties. In fact, Saginaw, Flint, Detroit, consistently rated, and Pontiac, the 3 or 4 toughest in the United States of America. He's had his MRAP for 8 months, as said in the Saginaw News, and hasn't used it once. So one of the toughest cities in the state had no use for it. Then that's a good reason to not have it.
Yeah, horses.
I mean, Brad, I almost felt like you read the same article that I was referring to when, they really started dumping money into the war on drugs, the late 80s and early 90s, and, that Miami Vice stuff and the cocaine, and, these guys, everyone had big money, and we had to, get the law enforcement to have the same kind of funds. There was, a psychological movement, to empower, and that's the beginning, of course. I think 9/11 was the tipper of the scale, but I don't know. I mean, I think, how often is it just that you can think of where there's a real need for a military response to citizen activity, criminal or otherwise, even the worst of it, and is it something that we need to have on call ready,
in case of protest?
In case of something like, not protest as much as just something else, whatever it may be, instead of having it in place, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if it's, I think sometimes it lends itself to, we've got a new toy, we're going to try to use it, why not, And we just go ahead.
I understand your point thoroughly, Michael, and I'm not going to completely disagree with it, but I am an older guy here, and I remember back in 1968 in the riots in downtown Detroit. Our family literally feared, and we had guns loaded and ready. And I think, and I'd like to hope that we've moved beyond that, but events in Ferguson have clearly demonstrated that we are not much further down the road from 1968 in that respect. And, the Hollywood shootout, the North Hollywood shootout, where those 2 guys rampaged out there, I think there are legitimate circumstances when the police force needs some heavier equipment. But certainly, there's absolutely no need to have it everywhere. I think even Sheriff Federspiel illustrated a great point, and that was Dow Chemical. There's a lot of chemical manufacturers in Michigan. And, should they have a major spill and there's people down and injured, it would be nice to have these assets available to make those kind of rescues. But certainly to effect a drug warrant on somebody who's sold a bag of weed, that's completely out of the question. And so, that sort of kind of cuts both ways there.
It's a matter of degree, and it's a question of, how you're going to use it and utilize it. And I know we'll agree, Brad. Listen, I know, Brad, you're playing, we like the academic and intellectual, debate and whatnot. But it's a matter of degree and how they're going to enforce it, and whether it's going to be abused in terms of forfeiture and, But I understand.
That's why regionalizing makes perfect sense. Because if you have a situation where you need that vehicle, you're going to have to call in and say, hey, this is my situation here. I'm requesting that you send the vehicle out. And, the policy should be, well, you're serving a drug warrant. What you do is you sit there and you do surveillance. You wait for the guy to leave the house by himself and go up to 7-Eleven and get a bag of Cheetos, and you take him down in the parking lot. That's good police work. It's just, like you said, it is a matter of degree.
Right. And it's so long as it's not funded by forfeiture proceeds. You know what, Brad? I will. You know what? Empower them regionally, but pay them with, local funding by the taxpayers only.
And traditional methods.
Yeah,
of
traditional
funding.
methods.
Exactly
of
right.
Then it takes, and have accountability locally, and remove the government immunity, for lawsuits as well. Then I'm down with it all. Just kidding. No, but
grenade launch.
Right. And if the state police maintain these regional assets, if you will, and the local departments had to call up and ask permission to use them, or to ask permission for the state police to come out and use them, there would be more accountability built into the system. The way it is right now, you got the guy over, I can't remember the chief of police's name. He's got, 500 or 600 residents, and he's got, all this armor and a couple MRAPs, and, I mean, it's ridiculous.
There's another town where there's 100 auxiliary police persons, all of which have badges and IDs and the right to carry guns. Some of it has really gone out of control. You're absolutely right.
Just ending, huh?
Yep, it certainly is. Brad, it's been a great, exciting phone conversation, but I know it's getting to be.
We got to get him on next week. It wasn't enough.
Well after our normal running time. I don't think we've been to 10:40 in like 50 episodes. It's been a long time. So we really have to go. But thanks again so much for calling in, Brad. And we will schedule you again. And when I say we, I really mean Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate you guys having me on the show. Don't forget that we got a bridge walk coming up Monday. We got other events. We got a medical marijuana conference in Traverse City. There's a big Michigan Normal party at Archie Keel's house in Kalkaska this weekend. This is a great time for all you Southern dudes to get your butts up here to Northern Michigan and spend a little of that hard-earned money up here.
Hard-earned indeed. Hey, listen, thanks for the reminder, Brad. And where can they find information about where to go and how to gather and the rest of the information about the Bridge Walk and about the Archie Keel event? Go.
You can go to facebook.com/MINORML, MI-Normal. And there's links there to the events, and go to the event page, and you'll see the Bridge Walks listed there, our September statewide meetings listed there, and some other events, Hash Bash coming up next year. And so that's the easiest and quickest way to find out information, what Michigan Normal's doing and their events.
Outstanding. Well, wow, great. And Brad, not only was your contribution in your own segment fantastic, but what you said in the Federspiel segment was potentially a game changer on a statewide level for some of those assets. So thank you very much for your participation, and we sure look forward to seeing you at the Bridge Walk on Monday and probably Sunday night before.
Very groovy, guys. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and you all have a good evening.
Great. Thanks again, Brad. Take care.
Bye now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brad Forrester, a board member of the Michigan Normal organization, one of the original architects of our community in the post-2008 vote period. Big guy, and he's been active up in the northern portion of the southern Lower Peninsula.
It's really all over.
Yep, sure is.
All right, Jeff Frazier, without further ado, is going to take us out. The secret talent hidden until the last 2 hour and 41st minute. Take it away.
A man from immigration came to my house today, said you ain't from his nation, simply cannot stay. There's been a declaration, boy, your papers ain't no good. Your quick evacuation surely suit this neighborhood. No, you ain't no permanent resident. Now your name is mud, you ain't nothing but a transient. I can see it in your blood. Your temperament is badly bent. This is not your home. Load 'em up, move 'em out. Adios, shalom. I said with fascination, sir, please help me to understand. Who got such duration that's still living on this land? The only population between us and nothing now is that silent congregation pushing Daisy 6 feet down. Don't want to be a permanent resident. I just don't like the view from underneath the firmament with peckerheads like you. Don't give you the president of the government. You end up undergrad. Take my travel documents and shove 'em up your ass. Keep your silly armament. Adios, shalom. Adios, shalom. Adios.
Jeff, what do you call that?
I just call that a true story. Oh boy, they tried to kick me out of Galapagos Island, so I wrote that song.
It's called True Story.
It's a true story.
Okay.
They did. They can't try to kick me out.
Personal response.